Hello everyone, welcome to the Bootcamp, our Tuesday session. Today we're going to be looking at how to build an application from scratch in React. The application we're building today is a COVID-19 tracker. Today I have Mr. Zeeshan Hanif and Mr. Zeeshan Hanif. Both of them are here. Both of them will be spectating today, mostly, unless I unless there's some uh, help if I need some help.
We want to
So,
give you the privilege for coding.
oh yeah, do you guys want to add anything, or do we just start today?
Just we want to build a COVID-19 tracker app, which will call the APIs and show the latest what is happening around the world. And basically, we will use all the technologies we have used so far. It is a, for example, we will use the context APIs, state APIs, hooks, and as well as how to call the APIs to getting the data and so forth. Adil, you start.
Okay. So let's start with me sharing my screen. Let's start in the terminal. So let's just start with the basic app. So we'll be using material UI. So we'll go to get started for the installation. Yeah, mountain. Non-English.
After we are done with this thing, uh, this will be due next week uh, on Wednesday,
Mm-hmm.
and then from next class we will look into routing, animation, and other stuff.
Okay.
Meanwhile, can you brief a bit what will be doing, how we will be creating app, and which API will be calling?
Yeah, sure. We will be building a COVID tracker. So I'm going to be using this API called the virus tracker. Um, and within it, if you go to the virustracker.com/API, you'll have access to global statistics. You will also have statistics by the country. Uh, and then they also have like a timeline of stats. So like you have a day by day count as well if you need
Okay.
it for all the different for all the countries. And then we'll be using Material UI for the front end. We'll be using components here. So for layout, we'll be using the grids, which will allow us to have make portions in our screen and be able to create different sections and keep them proportions. And then different. I'll be using an app bar to create the header. I'll be using different. I'll be using paper, maybe card, to have the data shown. I think it's done. We need to come up with a faster way to do this. There we go. So now we have our project set up. We can open it. Here. Actually, we can create a Git as well. And while we do that, I'll install this. So we can install the Material UI we'll be using. While I'll create a new repository. So we'll create the repository. So Material UI is installed. I also want to install these things. So we'll install. So we can install the font. And I'll open GitHub. Add existing. Okay. You can open it in Code Studio. This is installed. Still have to install the icons. You can do this yarn. Start the app so we can view it on the local server.
So at this moment, we are adding material UI into the project.
Yeah.
Okay. Basic structure has been created with the create React app, and now we are adding material UI.
Start. And then, so the material UI stuff, is anything left? I think that's it. So material UI is added, and I don't need this anymore. It's still starting. StreamYard takes away a lot of the computing power. There we go.
Yes.
Okay, so we have our basic.
Apple is about to release new processor based on ARM, new laptops based on ARM. So therefore, they might be better.
Next year, right? Probably.
Adil will replace only the processor inside the pack, right?
Yeah.
When we have our app running, we can now start building our application. So let's go into our source folder. Let's see what we have. We have our app.js folder. Let's get rid of everything we don't need. So I wonder if I should do something like this. If we can do that, that will be helpful maybe. Okay, so our app is running now. When we build when we go and build the COVID-19 tracker, there's a couple of things that we need as far as the functionality is concerned. So one, we need every basic site has a header which will show the site's title. So we can have like a header bar up top which will show the name of the application. We can just say COVID-19 tracker. And then aside from this, we also need to have a couple of different things. We needed to show the global statistics. So at this point, how many uh, cases there are, how many people have recovered, and how many fatalities there have been. That's on a global level. Then we also need to have another portion in the app which will show where by country you can select which country you want to find out the stats for, and then it will update the data to show uh, the same figures for whichever country you've selected. So how many people have been infected, how many people have recovered, how many people have passed away, and the overall total number of cases. So that's there, and then we also need
The
to
mic
create a.
seems to be a bit far or something. Sometimes voice get too slow, might be.
Oh, is it? Okay, let me
Or you have to speak louder a bit.
see my maybe sometimes this mic settings are also. No, it's not even using my mic. It's using my built-in.
Is it better now, the sound?
Yes,
Can you?
much better.
Yes.
Okay. So it was using my Mac's mic,
Okay.
even though I had it plugged. So here we go now. We have our, okay, so as I said, we want to create we can do it one at a time. So let's start with let's go and look at Material UI. We've installed it already. So now we should be able to start adding the different components. So let's take a look at, we have a component here in surfaces called app bar. So we'll start there. So what app bar does is it gives us a nice header section. So we can use this and we can get the code here. So this is the nice thing about having Material UI is we can copy this. And then here we would like to create a component. So maybe I can create a folder here for the components. And then in the components, I'll add a file for my header. And I can paste in the code from the Material UI app bar. Right now, I think we just need a simple app bar. We don't really need a lot of these different things. So let's stick to the simple app bar for now. Okay, so here what's going on is we're importing a bunch of the Material UI components that are used to put this app bar together. So let's see here. within the app bar now, if I save this, I would like to, it's been exported, so I can take this, I'll just rename this to header. I'll take this to my app.js and I'll add a header here. And I'll also need to import components. So I can import header. It's compiling. Also get rid of logo.
I guess you need to refresh the page. Sometimes the React does not reload.
Yeah, it's big. There we go. So now we have our app bar. And okay, so we have extra things in here we don't really need. So we can get rid of them. We can get rid of this. I don't think we need this menu button. We can probably just get rid of it. So this icon, we don't need it. And we also don't need a login button because we're not logging anybody in right now. That leaves us with a title. So let's just call this a COVID-19 tracker. And it's giving us some warnings because we've imported some things that we're not really using, these ones, so we can get rid of it. And now we have the header bar running. Let me also open this in another window here so we can get like the full screen view and we can get the development view here. So okay, so we have a nice app header bar all set up. Now we can get to the next part of our application. So we can leave this. Okay, so now we have our header. The next thing we want to create is what I want in the UI is to have two sections. One section on the left, I would like to have a panel showing the global statistics, and on the right side of the screen, I would like to have all my country listing, and that's where we'll add the graph later on as well. So let's create another component. And we could call this, maybe we just call it grid. I'll call it main grid actually. So now here what we would like to do is to use where is material UI? Okay, so in material UI we have something called a grid in our layout. And with the grid, what we have is, let's see, make it open. We'll be able to create like different sized sections on our page. So what I would like to do is have two sections. The first section on the left is smaller, and then the section on the right is my main section. So let's see here. What I want is like I want 4 columns on my right and 8 columns on my left. So which one can I get? I'll just copy this one. And we can update it. Okay, so this will be our main grid. And inside of it, I want to change from, okay, so here what's going on is if you check this one, it shows. So on the first grid, these are 2 different grids. The first grid has 3 sections. So I'll just get rid of one and then update 2 of them. And I'll also get rid of the second grid. I don't need it. It'd be nice if we can view it actually. So let's do this. I'll call this main grid, and then I'll import it to my app.js. Import main grid from component/main grid, and then this I'll put here. Something is wrong. Oh, I'll just put it in a div. Or in a fragment, actually. Okay, we need to put it in a.
Actually, header also need to be in a, because we need a
Yeah.
parent tag, single parent tag.
Yeah, we can only return one object, right, in the
Yes.
function. So, okay, this should now work. Okay, so if you see our app, we have our header and we have these 3 different boxes that have been created. So I would like to make it actually so we don't have 3, we just need 2. Get rid of one of them, and then for the others, so now we have 2, and then here I think it works like this. Goes 4. So this will be a 4 column grid, and this will be 8. So now we have one section which is 4 columns, and then the other section is 8 columns. Right. Okay. So now that we have the 2 different sections, now what we want to do is, in this one, I want to have my global data, and then the second one, I want to have my country data. So let's just start with one of them and build out the things we need. So if we have back at our material UI, we have something here called, where is it? Paper. We can use paper to create a couple different sections within our box for in the grid. So let's start from there. Get this stuff. I like to have my code separated out. So what I'll do is I'll create another component. Let me make this a little bit. So what I want is this is going to be my global data, and this is going to be my country data. Right, so I want my global here and country here. So what I want to do is have another component that I can code separately and then just plug it in here. So let's create another component here, and let's call it global data.js. So in global data.js, I want to have these box shaped things, which will contain my actual data. So let's paste this in from material UI, and now we have these different paper elements. Let's see now. Let's add this into our main grid. So I'll call this global data, and then I'll import this global data into my main grid. Global data. Here we go. And what I want to do here is, in this section, I want to call my global data component. So here I have some boxes showing up from our global data component. Now we can get rid of a couple of them. Let's just keep one of them. So we have a nice little box here. Okay, now what we can do is, maybe I want this, it looks a bit small in here, so maybe I just want to make it full width. I think I can do something like this, which will make it full width. Okay, and inside now I want to start adding my data inside my paper object. So here, so we want our global data here. Now we should be able to see it here. Okay, and then within it, we want to have multiple sections. So, and those sections would be for the global active number of cases, the global recovered patients, and then global fatalities. So let's see if I create like this. You can see what kind of, I'll just put in some words here. So it recovered and fatalities. Okay, so I have these 4 sections here now, and this is where we can put our data for our global stats. So let's start doing this. Okay. So now to get the data, we start looking at the API we're using as well, which is this one. So in our virus tracker API, right now I'm interested in the global statistics. which is this global statistics API, and they've given me the URL here. So if I copy this, I can come to something called Postman, and I can try to test it out. So let me get this. And I'll see some data being returned in JSON format. And this is what I want. I want the total number of cases internationally. Then I want the total number of recovered patients. I want the total number of fatalities. And I also want the total number of active cases. But this number looks a bit low. I think what they have done is there's a lot of unresolved cases, which makes sense if you think about it, because nobody really knows if these people are still infected or not. So it's better to put it in unresolved category than to put it in active. So active are those who they're sure, probably people in the hospital. And then these are probably those who had been tested positive, but went home and have not been retested, maybe something like that. I think that makes sense to me, which makes me wonder, do we want to have another section for unknown? We can see. Okay, so our API is working, the data is being retrieved in the get call in Postman, so we verified it. Now what we want to do is we want to query that, and we want to bring that data into this component so we can start using it and putting that data in the UI. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll use the fetch JavaScript fetch functionality, and we'll use it with the asynchronous functions, so that way the data will be fetched in the background while the UI loads. We can have some placeholder content here that will display while React and JavaScript are going to fetch the data, and as that happens, we'll just put some maybe dummy data or something like a message that says it's loading, and then we'll once the data is back, we'll populate the data in these different sections. Oh, one thing we should probably also do with the material UI, because we've already done the UI, is to have some typography, so we can have the text show up nicely instead of, it's kind of ugly right now, right? So let's make it look a little bit better. So we have in material UI, we have this component called typography, which gives us some nice formatting for text. So we can use this, and let's see. Let's see the code for this. Okay, I think we've already imported typography into our, or have we not? We have not imported typography, so we can import typography from, I think it's from material UI. I'll just do this. It works. Okay. So we have typography, we have make styles, because it uses make styles to apply this typography. Now we don't really need to copy the whole thing. So the components we want in our here. So I want global data. I also, maybe I want the date. So let's just do this. As of today, maybe we want a date there, and then we want a count here. So the data we want is something like that, where we have a count and then a description of what it is. So with the material UI, we can, for count, we want something bigger, maybe a heading 4. size, that might be nice. So let's try this. So heading 4, whoops. And this one will be my global count. So I'll call this, maybe I'll just put a number here for now. Something like that. And then for our description, we need something which is more, maybe like the body one. Maybe this one will be good for this. It shows up here. So header 4 is what we used. So body 1 I think will be fine. Or maybe we should use subtitle. Let's use the subtitle. This one. Actually, subtitle 2 seemed to be a bit better. It is bold. So let's use subtitle 2 for this text. Okay, so we have our count and our subtitle. I think I'm missing maybe, yeah, okay. So this spacing was for my cards, for my papers, but we also need this make styles for the typography to make it work. So let's also add a second one here, and we can maybe call this use styles typography, I guess. So it's different from our use styles for the paper object. So now we have this. We probably want to use it. Let's see. Do I need to put it in a div as well with the... Let me also make a second class for use styles typography. And then I can have a div for this, where class name is equals class typography dot root, and then I'll end the div here. Am I missing something? Global data, use styles typography. I applied it here. Use styles typography is there. Looks fine. And am I doing it fine here?
Is there typography is not being applied or something else?
Yeah, I feel like the subtitle 2 isn't being applied here the way it should be. It should look like this. A little bit bold, I think.
Make it H1 so you can see if it's really working or not. Add some changes to the CSS if it's really being applied or not.
Can I add a color maybe?
Yes.
Zeeshan, red?
Yes. The best one.
It's working.
Yeah, it's
Okay, okay.
working. So we don't need to worry. It might be not clear because of the small UI.
Yeah. Subtitle too. Okay. Okay. So now we have this data there. Okay. And we'll just want to have something similar. I'll copy this for here. So this will be my active, and I'll also have something.
So we have created 4 cards for the global states, each one for the actives, recovered, and the how many we have?
Yeah.
Active, recovered, and total cases. Okay.
Yeah. So we have the global total, the active, the recovered, and the fatalities. Okay. Now, let's. If I want to change the color for these in the CSS, let's see typography. Okay. So I have different paper elements here. So maybe I can, or I should just do it on the typography. I want to change the color of these,
Foreground or background?
the foreground.
So
So
we can do it in style typography.
yeah, within the typography here, right? So this is my active number of cases. So if I do style, I have to do curly brackets
We need to curly bracket and with another curly bracket.
or two curly brackets. So color would be what, red? Just make
Red
sure.
for the total cases and active cases, green for the recovered, and
Yeah, we'll get better colors in a minute. Let's just do this first. Make sure that they all have the color.
just for the students that we have multiple options to apply CSS. This is called inline CSS. The style we have applied is inline CSS, and another one which we applied classes.root. So that was the class CSS. So we can do it in both ways.
I don't want active to be red. I want active to be maybe orange. And then I want the fatalities to be red.
Red is there anyway.
There we go. Okay. Red is what?
Red is there anyway.
Yeah. Okay, so we have that done. We also probably want to apply it to the text. That should work. Oops, what happened? Extra. So we have active, recovered, and fatalities. Okay, now we would like to do something on, where is it? So for this, it's semicolon separated, right? Or not, comma separated? Comma separated. Here I want to do font weight like this.
W should be capital.
Comma expected. Weird. It applied it, but it's showing a error.
Is it error or warning?
It's like a red line. Looks like a warning, but it looks like an error actually. But it's working though. Should I ignore it?
If it's working, then let it be.
All right then. Okay, so I have all of this down. Okay. So all the content and formatting is there. Now let's do the API call. So okay, so where are we? We're in global data, and what I want to do is in the global data function here, we would like to have our code that goes and fetches the data from this API. Right. So we did use effect in one of the previous classes to get the data and to update the data with the asynchronous function. So we'll use that strategy here. And for this, we would like to import, first of all, we want to use the use effect. We also need the state. So we can keep a copy of state here. And here now in our main global data function, before the return, let's now let's create some state for our data, and then we'll use it in the use effect. Okay, so the first state we need is to have data, the state for where we're going to keep the data that comes back from the API call. So we'll have a constant, and we're gonna use destructuring here to save our data, and this is our global data. So I'll just call this global data, and then we also need the function we'll use to set or update the global data, and this will be with our state. Then the other, let's just do this first, and then we'll come back to the part for the loading. Okay, so here we've created our initial, this is going to be our state for where we store our API data. Now we want to use this use effect. Use effect. Okay. So within this, what we want to do is what we want to use this to get the data from this API in the background, And while the data is coming, we want to show one version of our UI. And once the data has been fetched, then we'll update the UI. So that's what this is going to be used for. And what we can do is we'll create a anonymous function here. And here within, we would like to create an asynchronous function to fetch our global data. Right. So this function is going to go to the API and get the data. And so now what we want to do is do the fetch call, and we'll save that in data into a constant called, let's just call it something API response. And within it, we'll save the data from fetch, and we want to get it from this URL. And this is an asynchronous function, and what we want to do is await. So now we have fetched the data from the API. Maybe we can also log this data. Let's see. Inspect. Console. Assigned a value but never used. What? Okay. Let me just get the data out from this API. So we want to get the data from API, and this is going to be the API response dot JSON. So the data we're getting back from the API is this JSON format. So what we need to do is get the JSON data and store it into our into a variable, and this is also going to be awaited. So that will be our. This way now we have our data from the API. So we have access to the JSON data. And we can update the state. Set global data. We can use this object. So now we have also set our global data. And this is the end of our asynchronous function here. And the other thing we need to do is we want to call the asynchronous function as well. So here we'll, something's weird with the way the indenting has been. So fetch global data. Let's see. Should have access to our API data now. Here we go. What happened? Oh, it took a second. I was impatient. Right. So what's happening here is this use effect is being called again and again. repeatedly, even though nothing is changing. So to make it stop, let's do something like this. I think that should. Oh. What happened? Okay, so we have our data here. There we go. What's this saying? Global data is assigned a value but never used. Global data, where is it? This one? Yeah, we'll use it in a second.
It might
We'll
be a
use
warning.
it. Yeah, it's a warning. So we'll use it now now that we have our data. What we can do is here we had created these 4 sections to populate with data from the API. So let's try to put the data here now. So we'll use our global data. And within the global data, if you look here, in the object, so this is our global data object, and within it we have results, and then in results we have an array, and so the index 0 of the array contains all of our data. So when we query this data from this JSON object, we can do we're querying the global data object, and then the results, and then the uh, index 0 of the results. So we should do dot results like this, and also it's going to be which value we need to get. So this was the total. The first box is the global total, so that is going to be total cases. Total cases. Oops. Oh, sorry. This has to be in the. Try again. Cannot read property results of undefined. Global data.
Basically, we need to check first because it gets loaded with the null. So we need to apply the check to the global data.
Right. So we want to make sure that our global data is there. Global data. And we want to make sure our global data dot results is there. Like this. So yeah, so now if we refresh it, the API calls the data and it shows up. So let's do the same thing for our other sections as well. This one is the active cases. So active cases is total active cases. Oh, so active, and then there's also unresolved. So maybe I'll do unresolved. I think I want to do unresolved and active cases. So
Which one
maybe
is
I want
bigger?
the unresolved is bigger, and then maybe it should be the sum of both of them.
We can do it. No problem.
So we can add the two, right?
Yes.
Total active cases. So we have active cases now. Then we also want the recovered cases. We'll put here in our recovered cases. Total recovered. So recovered, and then total fatalities is called total deaths. Okay. Total deaths. Okay, so that's all the data coming in. Now it's a bit ugly here. Maybe we need to add. Should we put a box or something around this so it's more centered, or what should we do? We should.
I guess it's fine. We can.
We move on. Okay. So all this data is here. Now what we also need is we want to handle it while it's being loaded. So for this, we'll create another state. This state will create for if the data is being loaded or not. So we'll call it data loading. Set data loading, and it'll be state, and we're going to make it be false initially, so it thinks the data is not being loaded. And then once we start calling our API, what we would like to do is initially we want to set the data loading to false or to true, sorry. So set it to true because we are actually starting to fetch the data. So the data is loading, and when it's done, make it done here, we can set it back to false. Once the state has been updated with the new data, we'll set it back to false. And now we have to see how to handle it. So what's happening right now is we have a state that has our data from the API, and then we have a state that tells us if we're fetching the data or not. And in this function, in this global data function, what we can do is we can have a conditional statement to check if the data is still being fetched or if it's already been fetched. And that's why we created this state to let us know if our data has already been fetched, and we can now show the data. So we'll do this if statement, which will check if the data has been loaded, if this is true or false. So if it's true, what we want to do is we want to return something. And what I would like to do is I would like to return the same thing, this whole thing. I think I can get from here. I think I can do this. But instead of showing the data from the API, I can do something like, can I make a variable here? I'll make a variable here. And then instead of having this whole thing, I'll just put loading.
Have we changed the status back to false?
Good question. I may have set it back to, I did set it back to false. Let's see.
But if it's working for the true or false?
It's working for true. It's working for true. So what's the problem? Do I have to make it like this? I have to like explicitly say.
Is there an exclamatory mark or not? No, we don't need the equality. Is there an exclamatory mark with if?
With what?
With if variable?
No.
Inside if?
Nope.
So if data loading is true, it will return this object.
Yeah. With the loading value, and if it's not true, it'll go to the standard return. Let's see.
What is the name of variable? Data
Set.
loading and this is data loading. Data loading.
Oh, I
and
put set data loading. Sorry, this is the function. I needed the variable. Right? Yeah, there we go. So if we refresh it, you have the loading data initially, and then once the data returns, it shows up. So that's that. One more thing that I wanted to do was have something to do. Let's see. This one, this library, what it does is it formats it as a number with the commas because it's kind of hard to read. So we can also install this with npm in our project. So I'll add another terminal. And once it's installed, what we can do is import number format to our global data, import number format. And then where we're yeah, it's still installing. So where we're displaying the number, we can use this number format. It'll add commas to our number. So let's see, in my main return here, I have this data, so I can, what I want is I want to use this calculation as my value. I don't need a prefix here, and I need to, for my value, I can put in the number from my API. No, I only need one. So something like this. And then I'll do it for all the others as well. Maybe get rid of all of these so I can copy it, paste it in all the, paste it for all the all the sections. And then use it in the value for each one. Okay, so I've updated it. It's still installing.
Takes too much time.
Yeah. Maybe we should start developing in containers or something.
Even in container, I guess StreamYard is consuming the system's power and the processes.
No, but if it, maybe we can have a container that has everything installed already.
Hmm.
So maybe we can go over the code in the meantime, just once more. Open it to full screen. So we have our main app, and we have two components so far: the header and the main grid. So in the main grid, we have the header, which is just our app bar. So it's just an app bar that has our the main title bar, which has our title. Then in the main grid, we have created two columns. On the left column, we've added the global data, and on the right column, we're saving space for the country data. So in the left column, I've added a component for global data. So that's what we had been working on. And in it, we've created a asynchronous function to fetch data from the API. And what we're doing is when it initially loads, it shows loading for each of the different boxes that we've created. And then at the end, once the data has been fetched, it changes the display to this return. And this one has all the numbers from the API. And I've just added some formatting, which will add some commas into the numbers, so it'll be easier to read. And it's taking a while. Do you want to add anything, Zeeshan, so far?
Basically, what we need to understand is whenever we are creating an application, we first need to implement or identify what are the components, and we need to separate them out. At this moment, I was looking at some questions or in comments.
Mm-hmm.
So there was some question that can we use can we call the API in the global context? Yes, we can do that. At this moment, we were just doing in the component directly, but as we are not using use, reduce, or context at this moment, that's why we have directly applied the API over here. And with the use effect, it will just affect the particular component. That's why we are using over there. So
Yep.
we need to separate out the component, first thing. Second thing is to call the API. We definitely need, as we are using functional components, so we need an hook, which is always, as we have learned in previous classes, that we need use effects, so that whenever we need to change any, apply any changes on the re-rendering of the component, we can use inside the use effect. And for the API, as we have previously discussed, the fetch function fetch the API, and you can get all the data. And as you can see, once we call the fetch, it gives you the response. After the response, we need to get what kind of data we want. At this moment, we have JSON, so we are calling API response.json. We can have text, we can have blob, anything, and that JSON returns the actual data to us.
Cool.
Can you convert the paper thing into the component? Yes, we can convert paper thing into component.
Paper gives it that effect, I think, to which it has the. It's like it looks like it's raised up. It gives it a little bit of the 3D effect. What is this doing?
Finally, it's just showing some progress, speedy.
Yeah. All this trouble just for some commas.
Maybe we can give an overview of what needs to be done next, because we are running out of time. Once it's being installing, we can explain what we need to do next.
Yeah. Okay. So what's remaining now is we have to connect to the if I can open, where's the API again? Okay. So what we also need to do, we have done the global stats. Now what we need to do is add the country stats. So for the country stats, we need a way to pick which country we need the data for. So maybe like a drop down or something which has like a list of the countries. And then once you select a country from the drop down, what it can do is query the API and return the data, just like we have done for the global. But instead of having all the data, it's just for the one country. So the way they've done it is if you call this API, it includes all the countries. So if I run this, it will include as you see. So it's alphabetical. So Afghanistan, Algeria, and so on. So for each country, it gives the number of cases, number of deaths, number of active cases, all the same kind of data, and how many people have recovered. So one way to do it is to call this API get all the data and then filter which country, and then find out that country's index and then get the data from there. The other way to do it would be, if we come back to the API, we can use the same API, but instead of equals all, we can do equal, and here instead of all, we give the country code. And then if you look at this one, each country has a code. It's a two character code, which can be used. If so, I think let's see, if you do equals US and run this, you will get the data for the United States. What happened? That didn't work. Was something else is different in there? Yeah, so if you run this one with equals US, then you get the data only for the United States. You don't have to get all the data for all the different countries. And similarly, like whichever country you want, if it's Pakistan, I think it's PK. So then you would get the data for Pakistan. So if we did it this way, you would first get the user to select which country, and then maybe save that into a variable, and then do a fetch, um, dynamically build the fetch, have all of this initially, and then concatenate the user selected country code, and then fetch it. This way you will get only the requested data instead of having to deal with all the different data. And then just how we have displayed the numbers for the global, we would use these numbers to display for the country. And then the last requirement we also have to do is a chart. And the chart would be the day-to-day cases. So the other thing this API includes is a full timeline and a country timeline. So if you look at a country timeline, you can open this API, and so if we get a timeline of the United States, it will give us for each date how many cases there have been, how many deaths there have been. And it's starting, it looks like, from January 22nd, and it goes all the way to, where does it end? 6/29. So today is the 30th, so it's just one day behind. It doesn't have today's date. It doesn't have today's data because
I guess
makes
for them
sense.
it's still 29.
What's that?
For them, I guess it's still 29.
It's still 29, yeah. And then I think they report all the data in the next day. So that's how they've been doing it. So even if we go to Pakistan, I think they'll still, I guess, even if we do for Pakistan, we will get, let's see, 29. So when it's the next day, so it always has one data prior. It doesn't have today's data because
Okay,
that's
so
hard to have. It's hard to have real time data.
we have ran out of time. Is our installation done so we can see commas or
It looks like it's done.
okay? So we'll just review how this comma will be applied, and then we'll wind up the session. Maybe you need to restart the server or refresh the page.
I have it. It should be running. Oh, it's compiling.
Okay. So we have done with the left side. to display the global stats. Now we need to do two more things. One is the country stat. So for the country stat, we needed some kind of drop down so that user can select the country and then we'll display stats of the per. So we'll have the same boxes, but for the country on the right hand side.
Yeah.
What we'll do is we'll display the states of the country, and then we will need to display this chart of that country's stats.
Should I stop this and try again? Looks like it's stuck.
I'm not sure if it's really compiling. We can stop it.
Try it again. Maybe when I installed the other package, it may have messed something up.
Control C would work, maybe. No?
Starting. Starting the server now. we need Mac to come out with those ARM processors soon. So much time spent waiting. Zeeshan, you're a good singer, right? Come on. There we go. Hopefully. Fingers crossed. There we go. Now it has all the commas and it's nicely formatted. So now the numbers are readable. So
you can understand. Yes.
Yeah. So today we've built out the left side of the app. Granted, it could have been, maybe if we have more time, we can make it look better. And then now next time what we'll do is have our country data. So we'll add the drop down. We'll have similar boxes like this. We can maybe have them along the top side of this section and then a graph down below. So we'll do something like this next time on Saturday.
Right.
All right.
Okay. Okay, then I guess it's time to take a leave.
We're out of time.
Yeah. Okay, then. Bye, guys. We'll see you on Saturday.
Okay. Bye.